Just wanted to say welcome back for our fall lunchtime lecture series. I'm Sarah Ripp. I'm the Outreach Coordinator and Undergrad Advisor for the Latin American, Caribbean, and Iberian Studies program. And we have a nice packed schedule for the fall of lectures every week and some other special events that are on our online calendar if you want to take a peek and see what we've got coming up. But I'm going to actually, because we've got such a large group here, I'm going to let you guys introduce yourselves and talk a little bit more about why you're here today. So thanks for coming, everybody.
All right, my name is Korb. I'm here because I went to Nicaragua and I taught English to kids, Spanish kids there. I'll tell you more about it later. But I'm a Russian, Spanish, Latin American Studies, and Anthropology major in my 4th year, and I will be staying here for a 5th year to study abroad in Peru.
I'm Jessie, and I kind of organized the trip to Nicaragua. I'm a junior majoring in accounting.
My name's Dan. I too went on the trip, and I worked with the same kind of with the same program that Brie was, but I was with the sports department, so I got to run around with the kids all day. It wasn't pretty fun. And anyway, I'm a sophomore in the computer engineering department.
I'm Elizabeth Weber, and I'm a junior here, and I'm majoring in psychology and neurobiology, and I worked in the clinic in Nicaragua.
Hi, I'm Ashley. I am a junior at Madison majoring in genetics, and when I was in Nicaragua I kind of floated. I helped Brie one day with English, and I was in the clinic one day, and then I also helped with arts and crafts.
Hello, my name is Henn, and I'm a junior here in the School of Education studying secondary education and math, and I too was in Nicaragua, and I mostly worked with the arts and crafts program, but I also taught English several of the days there. We were there.
Hi, I'm Michelle Patten. I'm a senior studying history and psychology, and in Nicaragua I also kind of floated. I was mostly doing arts and crafts with the children's program, but then I also taught English as well.
Okay, so the trip that we went on was through the Alternative Breaks Committee, so I just kind of wanted to give everyone a background. Is here on campus. It's a student-run committee that works to plan service learning trips for UW-Madison students throughout the United States, and Nicaragua was the first international break trip that we've offered in over 10 years. The trips occur primarily during the winter break and spring break, but we also offer the occasional weekend break and summer break trip as well. And the trips offer students a chance to travel while participating in service learning, working with a variety of issues including hunger and homelessness, the environment, education, and immigration. Part of the trip includes participating in educational programming once we get back to Madison. So this is part of our educational programming, like sharing what we learned while we were there with the Madison community. And while we were in Nicaragua, we worked with an organization called Viva Nicaragua, and their mission is to support the efforts of both public institutions and non-governmental organizations working to promote social justice and sustainable development in Nicaragua, as well as facilitate cross-cultural learning by recruiting motivated individuals to participate in experiential learning programs. And so they helped place us with a community down there and our volunteer work. They also found families for us to stay with while we were down there. And then they also planned some extracurricular activities so we could learn a little bit about Nicaragua's history and experience some fun things as well. And so while we were down there, we stayed in Granada, Nicaragua. And now Michelle is going to talk a little bit about the community that we worked with.
Sorry, I'm a little out of breath. I just got done with the gym class at Sir. But the community we worked at was called Solidaridad. Solidaridad? Can't ever say it. Oh, sure, sorry.
No, it's okay. Just
Just speak into
a
it?
little microphone. You
Oh.
can just stand there. But
It'll pick it up?
yeah.
Okay. Sorry. So it was a community that was actually right on the coast of Lake Nicaragua, which is, where is it? It's right here. The giant thing. Yeah. Sorry. Came a little late. So Basically, it was a former squatters community that's kind of in the transitional stages of permanent housing, and also there were some kind of squatters, almost shantytown looking things. And do we have our PowerPoint? Later on, you'll see some pictures of the community. The permanent housing was funded by a lot of NGOs, some of which were foreign, some of which came from the United States, France, I think some came from China. Potentially, I'm not entirely sure. But then also there was another one run through a women's program that was a government program of Nicaragua. And the really interesting thing about that is that it was the deeds were always placed in the matriarch's name of the family. So it was a cool way to kind of get some permanent housing for some of the more rural, poor people who lived in Granada. And then we worked with the community center there, and we worked with a lot of the children before they would go to their afternoon classes for school. We would do some programming, which we're now, I believe, going to talk about, right?
Yep. So the arts and crafts group came down to go first.
Go ahead.
So when we came down, there were several days that we were working directly in the community center with the students, and they were from ages 6 and 7, even like 5 and 4-year-olds, all the way to 12 and 13-year-olds. And so we came up with just a few projects to utilize recyclable materials to kind of get them involved. And when we went down there, it was actually Mother's Day in their culture. So one of the projects that we made were boxes that were kind of like chocolate candy holders, but they could really put anything that they wanted in there. So we helped the students go around and make these presents for their parents or for their mothers, just to honor them. So that was something interesting that we taught them how to do, but they also taught us how to make a craft.
Yep, while we were there, we made a big piñata. We spent several days on it, and the kids taught us how to make piñatas, which they were really excited about. And then we also made baskets with them, and we made these baskets out of newspaper, and it was really great because they actually didn't work very well. They actually turned out to be really, really hard to make, and so we had to just kind of start to glue newspaper together. And even though the baskets didn't turn out how we wanted them to, the kids were still so excited to make baskets, and they were holding them up and telling us everything they were going to put in them and use in them, even though they weren't what we quite intended on, which is great to see. That I don't think would be the same if we made baskets like that here.
Yeah, they were very enthusiastic, and even though like they were facing challenges and we couldn't really figure out how to get the baskets to weave, they were so like steadfast, and they didn't give up, and they were just all working together. It was amazing to witness. You want to talk about it, Michelle, too?
It's kind of pretty much it. And then at the end, we had a fiesta where they got to break open the piñata that they had made, and that was both terrifying and a lot of fun to see.
Yeah, we expected to put a balloon in the middle of the piñata, but we put a pot, and which sounds kind of scary to break open with the bat, and there's clay flying.
All right, so the next aspect was English, and I actually had a partner, but she's not here right now because she graduated and she's doing things for a different program. So I'm going to talk about the problems and the good things that I experienced while I was there, just as well as what she experienced. So I'm a Spanish major and a Latin American Studies major. I've been to Latin America several times, but going to Nicaragua was a new experience because I'm used to being around adults. I usually go for archaeology, but this time I was around kids. It's really different because the way they talk, they use a lot more slang and they talk a lot more quickly and they don't articulate. So it was a little bit of an acclimation that I required when I got there, especially since I was teaching the language, English, to them. I really had to understand their questions. So that was a little hard for me to get used to, but it ended up being really nice because they're extremely understanding. If I didn't understand, I'd ask a question and I'd just let them know, I don't know what you're saying. Could you explain it in a different way? And they were really receptive to it, which is a nice thing. Also, a problem was, since they don't have the same education that we have here, there were a lot of disparities in the terminology I could use. Like, I couldn't say, this is a noun, and this is an adjective. I kind of had to use simpler phrases, which I'm not used to because I'm a tutor, and I'm used to just being able to say what I wanted to, but it was a little different. Also, I had to teach to multiple ages, from 7 years old to I think my oldest was 15, and it was really difficult to teach such a large age group without one of the students getting bored. There would be periods of time when you'd just see someone in the back of the class not paying attention because we were doing something like head, shoulders, knees, and toes, which isn't really that fun for a 15-year-old. But it ended up working out because they were extremely understanding, and I had another partner, so we'd break up into groups if we had to teach the language to make it a little easier. Also, there were varying levels of English. There were people who were really, really good at it, and they were capable of forming sentences, and then there were people who didn't speak any at all and had difficulties understanding me when I told them the words and couldn't really repeat them. So we also had to break up in groups according to that. With 2 people it was a little difficult, but we managed it because they were really, really nice kids. Erin, my partner, she actually didn't really speak any Spanish, so that was interesting because she couldn't really get across a point, so she'd just be miming everything, and she'd be like, oh, this is what it is, and the kids would look at her like she was crazy, and they'd be like, es una loquita, she's a crazy woman, and it was just really great because it's a different culture, so they're not used to somebody being that rambunctious and boisterous when they're a teacher. She had to leave 5 days early, sadly, because of a class that started during the summer, so I had a few other people help me, which they're here right now, and they did a really good job as well, and I'm very grateful for that. So the things that we taught them, mainly it was vocabulary. We went through a lot. We went through animals, family members, colors, foods, numbers, and I was surprised because from day to day, I would do a different subject each day and they'd retain almost everything I told them. And for being as young as they were and not having a lot of experience in the language, I was extremely impressed. And they were very attentive during class, which definitely helped. They were interactive, they paid attention, and they participated without overwhelming me, which is something I was worried about with having all those different age levels. I thought that maybe they'd get a little too loud, and they did sometimes, but they were extremely respectful. I was glad to come into a situation where if I said something like, I don't feel like you're being very fair to me, I came here because I want to help you and I think that you should take advantage of it while I'm here, they'd stop being loud and they'd pay attention, which was so nice. If any of you have babysat or have kids, you know how it is. The bad thing was they hated grammar. If I tried to teach them any grammar, sentence structure, verbs, how to conjugate, they refused to listen. They're like, oh gosh, we do not like grammar. We hate grammar. And since I wasn't there for a long enough time and I couldn't install myself as a respected elder, I said, okay, well, for the time being, we'll just continue with vocabulary, but I need you to know that I'm leaving. So if you have any questions you want to ask me, you can ask me outside of the class, which they ended up doing. It was really nice because they were very personal and very personable. And they came outside to me even outside of the classroom, and they told me that they liked me and appreciated me. And it was really nice because when I left, they said they would miss me and they gave me hugs. They were also extremely receptive to cultural differences, which since I'm an anthropology major, that's what I study, cultural differences. They actually asked questions about our culture without me prompting them to. Like movie stars, they were very interested in Justin Bieber, so that's just not just an American thing. They also like Justin Bieber in Nicaragua. Other things like meals, holidays, how family life is, and I learned a lot about their family life and how things functioned when they went home. Like when they went home, they really didn't help their parents cook, which surprised me because I used to help my mom cook when I was younger. But they were extremely appreciative to their family. Their family was the most important thing, and they looked at their education as a means to help their family in the future. That is most of what I did while I was there. if you have any questions at the end, you can ask us because they help me as well. And we'll be talking about sports now. Yep.
Good. So, yeah, I worked with the sports program, and basically consisted of going and playing either soccer or baseball with the kids when they weren't in school. We'd play for a couple hours every morning, and yeah, they had a ton of energy, and it was a really good chance for them to get some of that energy out, help them stay focused in school and such. I also gave them something instructive to do with their time. Otherwise, you know, they didn't have anything going on. You know, Jessie had an experience where she saw this little boy waiting in a house, and he was pretty small and kind of frightened to take part, but she went up and invited him to play, and his mom was so thankful just to get him out of the house for a little bit so she could have a little time just to do the things she needed to do. You have anything to say?
It was a little bit, I was in the sports group too, and it was a little bit different for me because only the boys wanted to come out and play soccer, and when they like picked their teams, they didn't want to put me on either of the teams because it was like, who is she? Girls don't like play soccer here. But then like once they realized that I actually like knew how to play, then it was kind of exciting because then they wanted me to play with them. So that was interesting. And then also a couple of, towards the end of the week, we had some of the older kids in the community come. They looked like they were older than me, maybe even, who were just hanging around, and they started playing with the kids, and we thought that was really great, and we hoped that maybe they could like continue to do something with them during the day, because they had like makeshift goals and everything, so we were just hoping that it could like continue as something that they do within their community at least a couple of times a week. So I think we're going to let Elizabeth talk about her experience working in the clinics. All right, so I had the great opportunity to work in a rural clinic with 2 other interns, Seth and Sarah, but they're unfortunately not here right now. And I'll also talk about later about Tom, who worked in like the public clinic in the city. But so I don't think I was really prepared for what the health care conditions were like down there. You know, before you go, you kind of have an idea of what it might be like, but you are just like, it's totally different compared to here. So it's really hard to fathom compared to American standards. So mostly every day we would take a school bus. We caught it in Granada, and then we would take it for about 10 minutes to a street outside of Granada. And then on that street, we would take a moto taxi for about 20 minutes to the clinic, which was farther back into the rural community. And I don't know if maybe you could see, but the moto taxi was just so interesting. It was like a motorcycle with like a cab put on it in the back, and like it was like if you like were on the edge of it, you had to hold on tight or you were gonna fall out. But yeah, so and it was just really interesting because like the road to the clinic was it was a dirt road and it was really rutted out and stuff. It was just like, I don't know how, if they ever had an emergency, how they would ever get someone from the clinic to like a hospital in Granada, because it would take a long time. And so for a few days we spent shadowing Moises, who was the doctor in the clinic. He was the only doctor there, and Moises was a truly like awesome doctor. He really took time to listen to the patients. He would spend 20-25 minutes with a patient, which is just so different, I feel like, from the United States. Here you spend like 5 minutes maybe like with a doctor, but Moises took a lot of time to talk to the patients, and he went over just like basic stuff, like stuff that like we almost take for granted, I feel like, but yeah, like he just told them very basic things that they needed to hear, and you could tell that the people loved and really admired him. Yeah, and he was just so dedicated. He would go, or one day we went door to door in the rural community to visit people just in their houses and talk about like just life or their medical conditions and such. So that was really a neat experience because doctors here definitely don't make house visits often. So yeah. And then the clinic itself, I also have pictures up. I don't know if you can
catch them, but the clinic itself was next to a Commodore for the school children, and it consisted of one waiting room with about 10 chairs in it, and then like a really old scale, like the kind that you have to like move to weigh people, not like our digital scales. But and there was also a birthing room, but the birthing room couldn't be used because it was like unprepared to handle births, so it was just kind of used as a storage room while we were there. And then there was one exam room, and I was shocked by how much it didn't have in it. There was just one desk for Moises to talk to the patients at, and then there was like a curtain with like one bed, and then a few supplies on the wall. And there was also a pharmacy room, which had about 2 walls with shelves on it, and the supplies, there wasn't a ton of supplies, and also like if the patients wanted to, or if they needed medication, they gave what they could, like as far as money, but if they didn't have money, they got the medicine anyways, which was nice. And also their nurse was actually really the janitor, but the nurse had left and they needed a different nurse, so the janitor had to serve as the nurse there. So, and then Sarah, Seth, and I also gave presentations to, I think they were like middle school age children, about how to properly brush their teeth. We gave a demonstration on it, and then Moises talked and answered their questions, and he, this is why also he was a great doctor. He made almost every single kid ask a question because he felt that the only way to gain knowledge is if you ask questions. So I thought that was really cool. And then Seth, Sarah, and I also made or gave a presentation on proper way to wash your hands, and then we watched all the school children come through and wash their hands and made sure that they were doing it properly. And then another day, Sarah, Ashley, and I, we gave pap smears to women in the clinic, and which was a really awesome experience. Moises actually rode his bike around the rural community to recruit women to come in, and then we would give them the pap smears. And then we would just like alert Moises to anything that was concerning and that looked beyond our control, or beyond our what we could do. And then another day, the health ministry came to Solidaridad, which was the community that they worked in, and their women got pap smears. Kids, or Tom, another person who went on the trip, he vaccinated the children, but if the children, like once they saw them, they ran. So Tom had to actually chase them around the village so that he could capture them and then give them the shot. But also, if people needed to see a doctor, they could come in that day and see a doctor. And then we also did HIV testing. The thing about the HIV tests, though, is that they were supposed to be refrigerated, but they weren't, and we were in like a 90+ degree room. So, yeah. But then Sarah, Ashley, and I also got a chance to shadow an OBGYN in the hospital in Granada, and that was also a great experience. We got to see how different like their culture was handling births compared to our culture. Actually, the women there are not allowed to make any noises during childbirth. So, yeah, they have to like just keep silent. And actually, a nurse was laughing and calling one of the women a baby because she was kind of moaning because she was in such pain. And they don't get any, like they don't get epidurals or anything. So, and also in the hospital there was no running water. So I don't know if you guys saw, there was like a bucket with like a bunch of water, but that's what they used as their water. And then during the birthing process, like everything was just fell into like a trash can, and then they had just like, I don't know, like jugs just full of water and other stuff that they used. But also the hospital was like open to the environment. Like there was just trees and like plants like growing in like the open air. And actually, like, dogs and cats were, like, allowed to, like, run around in the hospital. So that was really different. But yeah, and then we ended up seeing 2 births that night, so that was really cool. Okay, and then Tom, he worked in the public health clinic in Granada, like in the city, and he assisted with a physician who had lost her nurse because of budget issues. So what he did was he took vitals and gave shots and started IVs and stuff like that. And Tom also noticed the great relationship between doctor and patient. He noticed that a lot of people didn't trust like outsiders coming into the clinic, and especially men didn't trust outsiders either. But he did notice that there was a great relationship between the local doctors and the patients. And another point about the men is that I think during our shadowing, I only saw one man come into the clinic, and he was just a teenager. But we saw no men, even if I'm sure there were some that needed to see a doctor, but they just did not come in. So yes, I was really impressed with the doctor and patient interaction, and I definitely would. I'm pre-med, so I would like to implement that in my career. Hopefully, become a good doctor like that. But yeah, so that was the clinic stuff.
All right, so the next thing we're talking about are homestays. We were in groups of 2 or 3, and we stayed with different families in Granada. It was really fun. We were together, Michelle and I were together, and we stayed with a woman. Her name was Marta Bustamantes, and she was the head of the school, and she was a math tutor. So students would come to her house at night, and for hours she would tutor, even after she was done with school. So it was an interesting schedule, because we usually woke up around 7, but by that time she and her...
I'm a sophomore in the computer engineering department.
I'm Elizabeth Weber, and I'm a junior here, and I'm majoring in psychology and neurobiology, and I worked in the clinic in Nicaragua.
Hi, I'm Ashley. I am a junior at Madison majoring in genetics, and when I was in Nicaragua I kind of floated. I helped Brie one day with English, and I was in the clinic one day, and then I also helped with arts and crafts.
Hello, my name is Henn, and I'm a junior here in the School of Education, studying secondary education and math. And I too was in Nicaragua, and I mostly worked with the arts and crafts program, but I also taught English several of the days there. We were there.
I'm here because I went to Nicaragua and I taught English to kids, Spanish kids there. I'll tell you more about it later. But I'm a Russian, Spanish, Latin American Studies, and Anthropology major in my 4th year, and I will be staying here for a 5th year to study abroad in Peru.
I'm Jessie, and I kind of organized the trip to Nicaragua. I'm a junior majoring in accounting.
My name's Dan. I too went on the trip, and I worked with the same kind of with the same program that Brie was, but I was with the sports department, so I got to run around with the kids all day. It was pretty fun. And anyway.
Just wanted to say welcome back for our fall lunchtime lecture series. I'm Sarah Ripp. I'm the outreach coordinator and undergrad advisor for the Latin American, Caribbean, and Iberian Studies program. And we have a nice packed schedule for the fall of lectures every week and some other special events that are on our online calendar if you want to take a peek and see what we've got coming up. But I'm going to actually, because we've got such a large group here, I'm going to let you guys introduce yourselves and talk a little bit more about why you're here today. So thanks for coming, everybody.
All right, my name is Korb.
Trip as well. And the trips offer students a chance to travel while participating in service learning, working with a variety of issues including hunger and homelessness, the environment, education, and immigration. Part of the trip includes participating in educational programming once we get back to Madison. So this is part of our educational programming, like sharing what we learned while we were there with the Madison community. And while we were in Nicaragua, we worked with an organization called Viva Nicaragua, and their mission is to support the efforts of both public institutions and non-governmental organizations working to promote social justice and sustainable development in Nicaragua, as well as facilitate.
Hi, I'm Michelle Patten. I'm a senior studying history and psychology. And in Nicaragua, I also kind of floated. I was mostly doing arts and crafts with the children's program, but then I also taught English as well.
Okay, so the trip that we went on was through the Alternative Breaks Committee, so I just kind of wanted to give everyone a background is here on campus. It's a student-run committee that works to plan service learning trips for UW-Madison students throughout the United States. And Nicaragua was the first international break trip that we've offered in over 10 years. The trips occur primarily during the winter break and spring break, but we also offer the occasional weekend break and summer break.